Welcome to Newsnight. Joining me, of course, is MWENDA, journalist, researcher, former fellow at the Stanford University. And Andrew, you did not so long ago, I think when you were still doing the Capital Minute.
I have been a fellow at Yale University, at Oxford University. Why do you only mention Stanford?
All right, I will add Oxford University next time. I won't forget. You did mention this a couple of months ago when you still were doing the Capital Minute with Alan. You did allude to the fact that you saw the crisis in South Sudan come,
Yes.
and it's finally come to us. Yesterday we saw a factional fighting between one clan against the other, one ethnic group against the other. The fighting continued today. We're told the death toll has climbed to about 60 now. We would first want to understand from your position. Did you see this coming, especially the Dinkas versus the Nur, and of course Kir versus Riek Machar?
Yes, on my Capital FM show, I did predict about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, that you see, Khartoum, if you put yourself in the shoes of the government in Khartoum, when they signed the comprehensive peace agreement, they never properly delineated the borders. If you're Khartoum, it is not in your interest to have the evolution of a more stable political order in South Sudan. Because if you allow the evolution of a stable and consolidated state, then it has the capability to negotiate better terms on whether it is on the oil pipeline, better terms whether on the delineation of the border, so that much of the oil falls into the north. So the interest of the north would always be to undermine the evolution of a stable government. And they had two options. Option A is to directly fight it, which the international community could not tolerate. Option B was to either support a person like Konyi to undermine that government, but I think also because Konyi is an international terrorist, they could not take that, the second option. Now option C was to instigate, simulate or stimulate internal discord between within the SPLA between Riek Machar, the vice president, and the President Salva Kiir. And I think that's what they have achieved. And they would of course exploit the ethnic differences between the Nuer and the Dinka, the personal differences and the rivalries between Riek Machar and Salva Kiir. And they have succeeded in that. And let me tell you this. Now that North Sudan has achieved it, two things are going to come. If you have a war in the south, it will always drag Uganda into that conflict. Why? The guarantor of the independence of South Sudan is actually Uganda. Partly because Museveni needed South Sudan and an alliance with South Sudan in order to win favor with the United States, which is an important strategic asset within his wider scheme of politics. The second is that if you have an unstable South Sudan, then you have a haven for Joseph Kony to organize and attack northern Uganda. So again, Uganda has a deep interest in any situation that evolves in South Sudan. So if you have that conflict in South Sudan, it is very difficult to localize it. It's going to become an international conflict.
Andrew, Rebecca Garang speaking to the BBC today, a clip we carried on the news tonight, called this politically motivated. However, you seem to think that the Sudan, the North, was looking into the issues of ethnicity and, of course, the border issues. But the greater issue here, and many have alluded to the fact that it must be a war between the Dinkas and the Nur, South Sudan government disagrees. And when you look at the list of the 10 SPLM officials they've actually arrested, most of these are actually both Dinkas and Nur. So the issue about the ethnic war between the Dinkas and the Nur cannot come to play.
Well, it will come to play this way. First of all, I think the major spark is the personal rivalry between Salva Kiir and Riek Machar. Riek Machar is a highly educated man with, I think, a PhD in economics or whatever it is. But I think this Salva Kiir is less educated. So Riek Machar believes that he should actually be the leader of South Sudan. But remember, the mainstream SPLA said at one time you broke away from us, you even joined the government in Khartoum, you had an alliance with Joseph Kony. Remember that at one time Riek Machar allied with Joseph Kony. This is why I'm saying that Uganda is going to be dragged directly into that conflict. So if Riek Machar had links with the Kony, he had at one time works with the Khartoum, so there is that suspicion of him. And for Salva Kiir, who was always the commander, he's the one who led the initial rebellion, which Garanga was sent by actually President the Mayor of Sudan to go and quell. When Garanga reached there, he crossed over and joined the rebels. That is all. So the person who initiated this rebellion is actually Salva Kiir. So he can appeal to that historical legitimacy. But he's despised by Riek Machar and vice versa. So I think that the personal difference between those two, power rivalry between the two, is what has led to the current conflict. Well, let me hold your breath there.
Yes.
But what will happen is that how are the two sides going to mobilize political support? I think that Riek Machar will have to fall back onto his ethnic group, because remember that men and Nuers have been seeing him as the most powerful figure from the ethnic community representing them in the government. If you arrest him, they will respond by saying we are being marginalized. It does not matter how many Dinkas are arrested with him, I can assure you. So the support or the resistance to his arrest will most certainly take an ethnic tinge.
Many believe, and looking at the wires today, the international community and those who were talking about this issue with the media especially, and by that I need to state that there's not a lot of information coming from South Sudan. Most of it is coming via social media. I need to say that what has been happening on the wires alludes to the fact that Salva Kiir isn't the same man of 1 year ago, that he's cut his ties with the international community that has actually been helping South Sudan, and he's now cutting the figure of a man we saw yesterday in military fatigues as a man who's either been pushed to the wall or a man who's going to fight his way to stay in power.
You see, I should tell you, Morris, when you're out of power, it's like when you are outside the playing field and watching people play soccer. Oh, one person could have scored that goal. It's so easy. Once you're in power, there are so many factors and combinations that come together that make the game very difficult. Remember when President Yoweri Museveni took power here, he kept saying, oh, tribalism, I will end it. Oh, corruption, I will fight it. Oh, but he accused Obote of all sorts of things. If you look at every single thing Museveni accused Obote of, he has done it worse than Obote. Whether it is militarism, corruption, incompetence, nepotism, everything. And Obote did even better than him. So why do you think he fell into the same trap? It is precisely because once you are in the game, the things change. So Salva Kiir, who was just an opposition politician or possibly a rebel commander, cannot be the same person when he's president, because now he has to juggle many things. Imagine it has been very difficult for them to sustain a coalition for just 2 years. And didn't they get independence last year?
Yes, it's about 2.5 years, just 1.5 years.
1.5 years ago, they cannot hold it together. So this is what I think. I don't think he has changed. It is simpler that it seems to me that most likely the mechanics and reality of power, the dynamics of having power, managing international relations, managing internal conflicts, managing regional relations, managing economic resources is such a complex and difficult matter, and his behavior right now is a reflection of that. Another thing, you saw him in uniform. Why? Because now he's facing a military rebellion. He must assert himself. He must demonstrate that I'm a general. I can fight back. And that's what he's trying to show. What else would you wear if people are challenging you militarily? You must pull back your uniform with the wardrobe and put it on so that you can demonstrate your own military credentials. And
finally, the AU seems to be on the back foot. No communication, no statement from the AU. I know the chairperson has spoken, but the AU is still dragging their feet on actually moving in to help quell the violence.
I think that
but also the UN Secretary General, who just phoned, I'm told, who just phoned Salva Kiir, was asking for an end of hostilities on both sides immediately. So you see, the international community is actually the one taking the forefront, and again, the AU, who should be leading this, the talks and probably ending these hostilities, is still reneging and on the back foot.
Right now, I do not know whether the EU has done anything. It may have done something privately, and the UN always calls. But I do not think that international intervention is what will solve that problem. Last year, I was invited by the South Sudanese government to go and meet President Salva Kiir and meet many of his senior officials. When I stayed in Juba and looked at what was happening there, I left a disheartened person because I was unable to see the semblance of even the most rudimentary basics of a government. There is total chaos in Juba. Whether it is the way they manage the airport, the way they manage every single thing is in disarray. Now you can imagine a state that has not yet consolidated, people are trying to find their feet. This is the first time, I think, in Africa since 1960 that someone is building a state from scratch. Because there is not a history, unlike Rwanda where the state was destroyed, at least there was a history of a state, so there was a psychology of oneness. But here you do not have a history of a state, you don't have institutions, you don't have roads, you don't have electricity, you don't have anything. And then in that process, you have this conflict. What would the AU recommend to South Sudan?
No, you'd be expecting that at least now their response team and their force they've been trying to put together would be the first on the ground to actually quell the violence on both sides. So that we actually do not have 3 Ugandans were killed in today's fighting. So we do not have more people shedding blood.
I think that if the international community gets involved in South Sudan, they may operative word is may, be able to achieve short-term humanitarian objectives, but at a price. And that price will be to disable the very mechanisms that allow internal attitudinal and institutional change, which will create a durable or a long-term solution for that country.
All right, many thanks, Andrew Mwenda, who've been speaking to.
You forget to add the old man of the clan.
Well, at least you said it. Andrew Mwenda on Newsnight.